185milessouth.com.
Smash that Patreon button.
185 Miles South, a hardcore punk rock podcast. What's up, everyone? This week on the pod, we are doing a special episode on one of the greatest hardcore records of all time. That's Life, Love, Regret by the band Unbroken. I sat down with Dave, Rob, Steve, and Todd all separately and interviewed them about this record. Then I mashed it up to make this episode. I think you're going to dig it. It is as in-depth as you could possibly get on a record. And this is a record that so many people connect with and love. So I think it's a nice little piece of history here. Also on the back end, there's testimonials from some people whose lives were affected by this record greatly. Ati Moran, Rob's brother, Aaron Bedard from Bane, Dan Sant, the best dressed man on the podcast, Justin from Field of Flames, the main man Mike Cheese, Justin Pearson, and Northwest hardcore legend John Pettibone. So check out the whole thing. Those are at the end there. Also, next week on Patreon, I'm going to release several of the interviews unedited. So you're going to see how this episode is. It's everything mashed up. But if you want that raw shit, you got to smash that Patreon button. Handle business. But let's get on with the pod.
I'm Rob Moran, and I played bass in Unbroken.
So the impetus for Life, Love, Regret begins during your 1993 U.S. tour with Mean Season. Is this correct?
That's correct. I mean, at that point, we had a couple songs written already in drop tuning that appeared on the Groundwork split 7-inch that was about to be released that we recorded for. And also a compilation track as well. And so by the time we hit tour in 93, we had 4 songs for Life, Love, Regret written. And we started to play some of those songs live on that tour with Mean Season in 93. And I know that we have set lists from that tour that confirmed that. So it was definitely happening at that time.
Hi, I'm Todd. Played drums on Life, Live, Regret. Unbroken. That was the first tour we ever did. It was fun, exciting, a lot of freedom, kind of first time out in the world and sort of away from school and parents. It was wild. I mean, had no we didn't know, we're on tour, we were playing shows, but what those shows were like was just such a mixed bag. You know, we were not very well known at that point. You know, we'd go from shows that would be 50 people that were really excited, or we go to, you know, a garage and there's, you know, some guy sitting on a case of beer and just like, I could pay you in beer. I'm like, all right. I just bailed. So yeah, no one really, some people knew who we were. I mean, there's some distribution with New Age, so that helped. But yeah, mixed bag and just obviously being in a van, close quarters with everybody was a challenge. generally got along, but, fights would break out, and just being away from home, girlfriends, difficult.
What are your memories of writing Final Expression and the setup for the split 7-inch with Groundwork? Like, these are the first songs where you're making a departure from ritual and coming into the sound that we would know on Life, Love, Regret.
Yeah, I mean, it was, Eric and Steve coming with songs, with music, and, a completely different direction, uh, definitely lifting off kind of what Integrity was doing. But how do we make it heavier? How do we um, make it sound nastier and dirtier? And I can't remember who thought of it, but it was either Eric or Steve said, "Why don't we try drop tuning?" And suddenly the song sounded even gnarlier. And then we discovered drop tuning, and I think we were so low. I think we were in drop B or even in C when we recorded the songs for Groundwork split 7-inch. So we were definitely not in drop D when we wrote those, but it was a real nasty tuning. And I think I, what I remember is being in Todd's garage working on those tracks and thinking like, wow, this tuning sounds darker. It's not just power chords in E, and you're harmonizing with something and using lyrics to try to invoke an emotion. And I think it was that drop tuning that made things more stark and and more sinister sounding, I think. Um, and especially with the lyrics to Final Expression, it was really dark. And I think the way the song structure and the tuning occurred during the writing of those songs, I think really lended itself to that and gave us a springboard and a foundation to say, this is how we're going to start writing music going forward. Using drop tuning. In a way that, like, I don't want to say we were the first ones to ever do it in hardcore. By no means is that true. But I think to mix hardcore and metal in a drop tuning way, there wasn't a lot of people, at least contemporaries, doing it at that time. I mean, there was, some of the Slap-a-Ham bands and things like that were doing it, but kind of more straightforward hardcore, there wasn't a lot of that going on at the time.
Hi, I'm Steven, and I guess since this is an Unbroken interview, I played guitar in Unbroken.
How did it feel to play those songs together compared to the ritual songs?
It was kind of weird because the early 90s was a weird transition of a hardcore from like the end of the 80s, where a lot of stuff was faster and still more punk. And then in 90s, it kind of got slowed down a lot and became more mosh heavy. And then some of the mid-tempo stuff, especially in the Orange County area. So I don't know. I don't think we were really thinking about being different or like we were onto something. We were just writing whatever we were doing.
I mean, you probably heard this from other people, but like the Ritual album was really rushed. I mean, we were stoked to do it. Like, oh my God, someone wants to record an album. We were writing songs to fill space in there. So the quality wasn't really there, and it just felt really rushed. And we just, as a band, how long we were together, didn't really make sense to record that soon. So any song in drop D was like sort of in practice, we'd kind of pepper one in like, hey, let's just try this. And we just really like the feel of it. At the same time, we're coming into our own as far as doing what we really wanted, not what we thought was the coolest thing to do, based on bands that we were playing with and sort of like youth crew vibe. We were kind of pulling back a little bit and a little bit more experimentation and just trying to do something really, really heavy, I guess.
It felt more free. I think, at least for myself, it felt more free. I felt more that we were kind of breaking out of this like hardcore straight edge mold, because yes, we were a straight edge band, and yes, we were a hardcore band, but we felt very pinned in, I think, from aesthetics and lyrical content and musical content. Everything that we were bringing to the table was very just hardcore 2.0. You had song about straight edge, a song about animal rights, a song about this and that. I mean, we just kind of went through the ABCs of hardcore with Ritual, and that's fine for what it was. But I think it felt good to kind of say, well, yeah, we're still a hardcore band, we're still a straight edge band, but we're going to do something different, and you're either going to like it or not. But it's for people that kind of understand. I think emotion through music, and understand what it means to be troubled and hurting, and be able to express that through this cathartic dark anger that became Life, Love, Regret. And I think that it was a very freeing time musically and lyrically, I thought, for everybody.
Where are you practicing at this time, and what are your memories of that rehearsal space?
A lot of times we were practicing at Todd's house. His parents had a garage, and they were cool with us practicing there in the afternoons, and we would mostly go there once or twice a week, and then just practice. Sometimes we'd practice at our friend Justin's house. I think we practiced at my parents' house a few times. So it was just basic garages at our houses, or friends' houses. There wasn't an actual studio. That we rehearsed in. So it was all done out of houses and garages, whether it was our own or friends' places. To me, I thought it was interesting because I always wondered, like, what the hell are the people across the street thinking? Like, what? There's this racket going on, and like the same song, probably being played horribly 20 different ways, and in different tuning, and in tune, out of tune, and stopping, and then starting up again for a few hours. And we usually practice like 2 or 3 hours a couple times a week, and I just can't imagine what the neighbors thought. And that was one of the things that I always used to think about, whether it was my place or Todd's house or Steve's, whoever. It was always, what are the people across the street thinking about what the hell's going on over there? It wasn't very common to have like punk bands playing in garage, in some of these neighborhoods. So, I don't know. I remember that being something that we always used to think about, especially me.
Mainly the garage of my parents' house. We'd practice there, practice in the living room, where there's like a piano and expensive vases and just a lot of breakable shit that my mom would collect. And we'd just be rattling the windows, and things would fall off the wall. I can't believe that they let us practice in there. Just a white suburb, like the neighbors would be complaining. My dad would have to come in like, can you guys bring it down a little bit? But thankfully they gave us a little space and an opportunity to practice, which was good. So it was mainly garage, living room of my parents' house. And I think it would be rare that the whole band would be practicing. It would probably be either Eric and I, or Steve and I, or Steve, Rob, and myself, kind of coming up with stuff. And then we would, then when we did get a chance to practice all together, we'd, kind of introduce it to the band. I mean, Dave at that point was not living in San Diego. He was back in St. Louis. So honestly, we didn't play that often. It would be kind of special. So we'd be writing songs. He would come out, practice them really quick, and then play. Sometimes he would just ad lib as we go. and then he would write it down later. And a lot of times, like there's a few songs I can think about that, yeah, he would just come like, I don't know what to do, guys. And then we kind of break off into little groups, and I would be with Dave in a RV outside, and we were just sitting down and just rewind play on the songs on the boombox and just start writing words down.
What was the state of San Diego hardcore at this time, and also SoCal and hardcore in general?
Yeah, I mean, well, San Diego was incredibly diverse. Like you would have the most amazing shows and you would have real diverse lineups. So you would go to a show and see Crash Worship and Drive Like Jehu and like House of Suffering, or you would see, Bad Brains and Pitchfork and Leeway. Or Click Atatic Itawi, Unbroken, and Slant Six and Undertow. You would see the most diverse lineups. And it was really fun. I mean, because there wasn't a lot of places to play. And so everyone was just kind of into everything. So, you got to see like Rocket from the Crypt open for Shelter. And you got to see, Judge play in a garage. And you got to see Inside Out play at the Shea Cafe. So it was always interesting. There was a lot of house shows going on, a lot of like weird warehouse spaces in downtown San Diego that people like lived in but would throw shows at. So you would see all kinds of different random little venues pop up for like 2 or 3 shows and then never have shows again. And then you would kind of have the Shea Cafe, and this other place called Cafe Mesopotamia that was out in Lemon Grove, in East County. And this woman, Tara, used to put on all kinds of shows there. So like Sensefield would play, Unbroken would play, Gehenna. There'd be all these different types of shows that would actually go on at that venue. And then, of course, the Shea Cafe. So there was like 2 or 3 like kind of steady venues, and then random pop-up ones or house shows all the time. So it was a really cool time to be able to have that. And I also think, from SoCal as a whole, it seemed to be a very transitional period. I think from a punk and hardcore, you kind of had that big Santa Monica Civic Center, country club, like bigger shows, to then going to places like Spanky's and Showcase Theater, or Club 8.5, that was having hardcore shows now and again. So you would still see diverse lineups a little bit in SoCal, but it felt very transitional. It was kind of like those bigger, 3,000 room venues were now, shows were now, 500 people, 600 people venues, or smaller, for most hardcore shows. And kind of like that big heyday of like Youth Crew, that big Fender's Ballroom show, like that tail end of the late 80s, early 90s, it kind of seemed to transition like really underground. And just random venues would pop up all over the place, Jabberjaw in LA, and the Macondo in LA, a lot of DIY spaces. So it was really cool that there was spaces like that in both LA, San Diego, and, even Orange County to a degree. But I just remember the lineups being pretty diverse and interesting for sure.
San Diego's kind of its own autonomous location. It has like Orange County and Los Angeles and stuff like that. It's a different world. San Diego kind of has its own scene of so many different genres of bands that we came together and played together and lived together and all that stuff just because we were unified in that way, I guess. The Shea Cafe kind of brought everyone together, and it didn't really matter what genre you were. It was always like a mixed bill versus, go to Orange County and you're going to get like 5 bands that are all doing the same thing. So I don't really know.
What bands are you playing with most of the time around this time frame? And then do you have a unique connection with any of these?
Yeah, I mean, Unbroken kind of played with everybody. I mean, we played with, Struggle and um, um, Heroin. We played with Clickatat. I think even Antioch Arrow Show. Slant Six. God, I'm trying to think so long ago. But yeah, a lot of random shows with a lot of random bands, obviously. But I think from a bands that really stuck out at that time, for us it was for me it was like Clickatat and Heroin and Antioch Arrow. I think were for me like the bands that really stuck out that were doing twists on hardcore. They're bands that I still listen to than most bands from back in that time frame. So those are the things that like stuck with me is being able to play with a lot of those bands. Um, and then we played with Outspoken, Mean Season, Strife, and all that stuff too. And that stuff was great. It was fun to play just straight up hardcore shows, but, I don't know. I think looking back at that time, the show that sticks out for me the most is when we got to play with Integrity at the Showcase Theater because we were so into that band and to finally play with them and talk to Dwid for a while after the show, and it was just incredible for like all of us. Like as soon as Integrity went on, like we were all in the crowd like losing our minds. Um, and for me, that show really sticks out because it was a band that was pretty influential on us when we were starting out.
To zoom back in to the Groundwork split, what are your thoughts on how Final Expression and the setup came out? And then also, how did your friends and fans feel about those songs compared to the prior material?
For me, it sounds more like a demo. I don't think Jeff Forrest at Double Time Studios was really ready for it. I don't think we were really ready for it. So it kind of sounds like a demo to me. It sounds like what's to come. Um, and it's kind of why we wanted to re-record them because we kind of dialed things in and realized what we really wanted to do with those songs. So for me, it became it kind of felt more like a demo to me. I would say that people liked it. They thought it was interesting. Um, I don't know if people have preferences, but I remember friends digging on it that like, whoa, this is brutal. This is heavy. This doesn't sound anything like Ritual. I remember hearing some of that, but yeah, overall, for me, it felt more like a demo that got put on a split 7-inch because I think it was a very, um, it was an idea that hadn't fully incubated, hadn't fully been formed. I think it was the kind of the seedlings of what was to come, and that's kind of how it sounds to me when I hear those versions of the songs.
I mean, honestly, when we did those style of songs, it started to get a little bit more traction. I mean, I think people were starting to take more notice of us. But I mean, to be honest with you, we weren't playing like big shows. It wasn't like we were a big band. A lot of what people have, what people see Unbroken is now or the past, like even like 15, 20 years wasn't the same band we were when we were playing live shows. We were still kind of, just working through it and just playing whatever we were playing. It wasn't like a big event or a big deal.
Moving on in the writing process for Life, Love, Regret, when in that process do you feel like something special is happening?
I think when we wrote D4, like for some reason that song just really hit. I just remember being in the garage and at Todd's house, and we didn't have a name for the song. It was just the fourth song written in D. That's why it's called D4. Um, and we just decided to keep it. But I just remember thinking like how gnarly it sounded with the intro, and Steve and Eric doing that kind of Slayer-ish like intro with those that kind of dueling solo part, and then how it's just so heavy and frantic, and then breaks into this quiet part that just gets so emotional and somehow fits. It's really dark, and the way Dave sings on it, and then it just builds and builds and builds. It was this tension that we could feel, I think, in the writing, that like, wow, this song feels really special. It needs to be the first song on the record. I remember feeling that when we wrote that song.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Claiborne. I was the vocalist and prank caller of Unbroken. The band, it actually was going through a transitionary phase, and we had played a ton of shows in support of Ritual, and unfortunately, I had to move back to the Midwest. And Steve and Eric and Rob and Todd all really started writing some great stuff. I was hearing some practice tapes, and it's hard to really exactly know how everything coalesced, because for a little bit of that, for a while of that, I wasn't around. But I did feel like everything from, Blanket and D4, and I'm trying to think some of the early songs we did in Drop D, I could just tell everything from there on was just getting better and more intense, if that makes any sense. And I felt like we were coming into our own as a band at that particular time more than ever.
We used to practice sometimes at this studio down by the sports arena, which was by, I think where Soma is now in San Diego. And I remember Eric had the riffs for what was D4, because when we started writing those songs, they didn't have titles. We'd label them D1, D2, D3, D4, and so on. Like, for example, like Setup and Final Expression would have been like 1 and 2. I don't know what 3 was. 3 was probably Blanket. And then D4 came up with that one, and we kept the title as is. But I remember when Eric had the opening riff, and then I was working on the harmony part, trying to figure out where it was going to fit best in the song, or what notes I was going to use. And I think that's when it clicked, because I remember specifically we had friends that were at the studio, and one of them was kind of looking at us like, what the fuck are they doing? Like he didn't understand what we were doing. And I have a vivid memory of that. And I think that's when, to me, it clicked. Like, this is, we're on to something else now.
Yeah, we're happy with the music. Felt good. It was more about how we felt playing live and what that experience was, and sort of the emotional connection that we would have as a band together, also with the crowd and like just the whole San Diego scene. So I think probably starting off recording felt a little awkward, because it was maybe we're trying to be a little too precise, I guess, or technical. But that I think the first couple hours after that, we just like, this isn't working. Like, I think I tried. I was never a great drummer, so I think I was trying to like, I'll play on a click track, so we just get it really tight, and I couldn't even do it. So I'm like, let's screw it, scrapped it, and then most of it was live. So I think at any given time, three people were playing at the same time. I think it was probably Rob, Steve, or Eric, and then myself. And then they would dub the guitars onto that, and obviously the vocals. So like most of it is live and pretty sloppy, but we loved it.
Do you have any other memories like that are as striking to you from the songwriting process?
Yeah, I mean, I think Blanket was another one. I felt that was really heavy. It's almost one riff for most of it, but it is so heavy, and it's so angry. I remember I think it was Todd and Eric that had the music for that. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, this is kind of just one riff. But what Steve and Todd are doing layered over that just takes it to this whole other level, and it makes it interesting and not boring. And it's not just one chugga riff. There's all these other things and moving parts going on between the interplay of Dave's vocals and how the guitars are just constantly churning in the background, independent of that one open drop D riff that just keeps pounding over and over. I just remember thinking, like, wow, this song like is the embodiment of anti-religion. Like even without the lyrics over it, it's just so fucking angry sounding that, you know, when we put the lyrics on top of it, it just fit the tone. And I just distinctly remember thinking, like, I cannot wait to play this song live because it's so pissed off. You know, and we were pretty anti-religious band, you know, and I believe most of us still are as people. So it was kind of this thing of like, you know, how do we channel that rage of being anti-religious and say so much with just music alone, but then complementing it with these lyrics to just take it to a whole nother level. You know, I think while some stuff was very kind of just off the cuff and spontaneous, I think other things were planned and thought out. And, you know, songs like D4 and Blanket felt very methodical in how they were written. And like those two are my favorite songs to play off the record.
Yeah. I mean, I remember writing Razor and thinking no one would like it, and they did like it. I remember writing Curtain and thinking the same thing. I remember being at Todd's parents' house, and Eric was in another room, and I played all of Curtain and thinking that wouldn't fly, and it did. I always kind of felt that way about songs. When I wrote Fallen Proverb too for later on, I thought that wouldn't fly either, and they dug it. So, but I mean, it was weird. I mean, Eric and I, Life, Love, Regret it's split pretty much 50-50 down the middle on songwriting between he and I. And I don't think you could tell who wrote what. I think we were totally in tune with each other, and, you know, just the vibe was going that way. And it was like either one of us could have written those songs and it would be the same thing.
I just remember being really influenced by our environment, just the San Diego scene. You know, obviously the departure from Ritual material. We're kind of coming into our own and not really caring about what was really popular at the time. We were like our biggest fans, basically, of what we were doing. It was like the whole like militant straight edge thing was going on that was really just turning us off, and just like violence at shows just felt really stupid. We were you know, really influenced by, you know, anywhere from the Smiths to Rocker from the Crypt. So like we would dress our own way, you know, people would make fun of us at shows. And then later we just started seeing, oh, people are trying to dress like us. We thought that was hilarious. So like, we're going to do our own thing, and we're not going to like be unapologetic about it. We were just kind of, and some of those songs, we were just letting the, you know, keeping the recording open and just kind of freestyling and just feeling it in the moment, and just very spontaneous. A lot of that stuff didn't sound the same live previous.
What other memories do you have about writing songs for this era?
Yeah, there's a few. Even though I would say maybe Unbroken has been referenced as an unassuming band, and I would agree with that statement. But at the same time, we put a ton of pressure on ourselves. And for me particularly, I have a nasty habit of procrastinating when it comes to writing lyrics. So there was a couple songs that were literally being written. We would all write lyrics too. That was the other thing too. I need to stress. But there was a couple of them. I'd work with a specific bandmate or something, and we would really hash it out. It was an intense recording process. Like I said, even though we recorded it on an insanely low budget, I think it was less than $1,000, which is insane. But the amount of pressure that we had on ourselves, that we kind of put on ourselves, it was an intense recording process. I mean, it was, it definitely tested us as a group, but I think you can hear the intensity and I don't know, like the true to its craft nature that we put on that album. We really were putting out ourselves on that album more than we had on any other thing else.
What are your main songwriting influences during this era of the band?
I mean, it's everything. I mean, I'm sure the other guys will tell you as well, but I mean, we were channeling depressive British music mixed with, back in the day, we, loved Slayer and Pantera and Entombed and things like that, and Integrity and, and Jawbreaker. And so, Drive Like Jehu and Rocket and all that stuff. So for us, it was, how do we channel all these things that we love? And regardless of like one song sounding overtly like a particular genre, there's still pieces of some other genre that are welded onto that. And I think some of the songs really carry that through. I mean, it's everything from, Smiths and Joy Division to Slayer and, Entombed, Integrity, like I just mentioned. Those were all things that we were into, and those were all things that we just channeled into this music. It's, 5 people that weren't very happy, were scared teenagers, worried about life and the future and everything else. And we took a lot of solace in music. We'd all go to a lot of concerts and, you know, go see whoever play, The Cure, Morrissey, Depeche Mode, but then go see Slayer and, whoever else, or some hardcore show. So for us, it was the manifestation of, I think, all these different genres that truly bled into what this album represents. It's not any one style, but it's still cohesive,
Wide range, I would say. Obviously, the metallic component to the music, it was like Slayer, Pantera, Integrity. We're kind of like, oh, this is pretty heavy stuff. But again, it was like that also was very sort of tough guy to us, which we liked the heaviness of it, but our scene didn't really allow that or really care for that stuff. And it was sort of the noise, emotional aspect that we sort of brought into it. So bands like Heroin, Drive Like Jehu, Downcast, stuff like that, were just really heavy. But like the content, like the lyrical content was definitely away from like, let's do where's our racism song? Let's do that one. Let's do our drug-free song. Like kind of checking the boxes. We're like, we're just going to talk about how we feel. Like that was important. It was just be ourselves.
We weren't like metal kids. Obviously I like Slayer, it shows, but in terms of like your basic, I mean, we like thrash metal. We like all the classic stuff you grew up liking in the 80s with like, Slayer, Metallica, Anthrax and all that stuff. But in terms of like being a metal band, I can't say there was something that we were like, oh, cool, let's do that. One of the things we were into was Helmet and the idea of drop D, and Quicksand started doing drop D on Slip. But it was just a coincidental timing thing. I think we just wanted to be heavy, but not be like a metal heavy. I don't know. It's kind of weird. We just liked it was just angry. It was just tough.
How are the relationships between band members at this time? And did the writing process bring members closer, or did some members have to isolate to express themselves with their songs?
Wow, that's a really good question. I would say there wasn't any schism or any sort of wild tension or anything like that during the writing process. It was really straightforward. Everyone got along. Every now and again, you'd have like the typical tour van crap that goes on. Someone gets pissed off at somebody for something innocuous just because you're stuck in a van for 9 hours, But, aside from things like that, like, I just remember us being close and kind of holding on to each other. I think we had a really tough tour in 93. Eric quit halfway through and left in DC and took a Greyhound back. Thanks to Mike DC and his parents for getting Eric to a bus station so he can get back home to San Diego. So it was like we got back and there was this kind of few weeks of, well, what do we do? Do you still want to be in the band? Like, we don't want you to leave. And, we kind of worked that out. And ever since then, it just became this cohesive unit. And I think, at the time, whatever Eric was going through, it had been worked out, I think, for him to a degree where he felt that he could participate again in being in a band. And I think some of that rage and emotional distress, I think, went into writing some of these songs. But it didn't mean that like we didn't all get along and we didn't have a good time, writing these songs.
I think relative to the individual, and I know that sounds like a cop out, but I would say like, yeah, I mean, there were some times, I mean, it was an intense process, but yeah, I would say good thing we had like a little break after that. I think doing Life, Love, Regret was an emotionally kind of depleting experience. I mean, it was, yeah, I mean, it was, we put a lot into it, and, the crying that you hear on it, the screaming that you hear on it, the everything on it, like it was, I wouldn't say exactly emotionally exhausting, but it was, and in such an intense album, and recording it was so intense that it just kind of, thank goodness we had a little bit of time off after that. I would say it brought us together in some ways. We respected each other as a group and that aspect, but at the same time, we needed some time to kind of like recover from that.
I would say isolation for sure. Where we only came together. We would hang out once in a while, but it was on stage where we would come together, where we felt like a unified group. But most of the songwriting was done separately. It would be Steve and I, or Eric and I, kind of working through some riffs that they have, and then introducing it to the band. And then, one or the other, like maybe Steve had 80% of a song and then Eric would finish it, or vice versa. but they're just getting, especially with the songwriting Eric had was coming from a very emotional, vulnerable state. That had a big influence on what that sound was. Yeah, it's kind of hard for me to talk about that.
When do you come up with the life, love, regret concept?
So Eric had the idea of Life, Love, Regret like before Ritual was even recorded. You know, he would write it on his arm sometimes, and then he wrote it on his chest. And one of the photos on the back of Ritual, he actually has it written on his chest. So the concept of Life, Love, Regret had been around for at least a year before we even started writing music for it. But as far as the album itself, is that what you're asking, or just like the general concept?
The concept.
Yeah. So, you know, the concept of Life of Regret, I mean, like I said, that had been around for a little while. And, you know, when we started working on the record proper, we still didn't have a name for the album. And, you know, I talked about it in other interviews. You know, we were recording, and it was like the second or third day of recording. I went in, I had a dream the night before, and I said, "Hey, I have this idea. I don't know what the pictures are, but I think we call the record Life, Love, Regret, and we have a different picture in under above each word." And that was kind of the concept of, we're going to do this record, we're going to call it Life, Love, Regret. And because I always liked that phrase that Eric used to write, him and Steve always used to write stuff on their arms and stuff. It was a very 90s thing to do. But I came in, and I remember writing on some paper saying, you know, here's a box, and then under it Life, and then another box, and saying, I don't know what these pictures are, but I had a dream, and it had 3 pictures and 3 words, and this is what I want to do. And then that's what we ended up doing, to move forward and say, okay, we're going to build an entire package around these words, like what it means to be in love and to live life and to lose those things and have regret. And that kind of played into, I think, the look and feel of the concept for the record, and I think even how it sounded.
I think that came from Eric. He's like, wanted to call it Life, Love, Regret. I think he was writing some lyrics. You know, it's the lyrics of one of the songs, and he was writing it down. I think it's at Denny's, and just his crazy handwriting, which is, you can see on the back of the circa 77 7-inch. It's crazy, just kind of scary handwriting, but kind of sketched these things out, and it was very emotional, vulnerable, really deep and a little mysterious. But he came up with this, and it's kind of locked everything in. We probably had, before we even thought about that title, we probably had maybe 4 songs. So getting close to half of the record written already, and we would kind of like sprinkle those into, you know, when we would play live. Once that happened, it started to form into not just a record, but almost like a concept album. And then everything started sort of falling into place as far as what we wanted the album to look like, what type of things we wanted to include in the record, the song list, all that stuff.
We're we're going to go through the track listing. What are your thoughts on the following songs? First, D4.
I love that song, start to finish. I love everything about the song. I love the way it just kicks off, and it's just like a punch in the face, and it just gets this real kind of jerky freight train pace of um, kind of a slower mid tempo kind of groove, and then it just gets into this heavy like breakdown of a chorus. And when Dave yells like "I'm sorry," like I to this day I still feel it. Like even when we play it live, it just I'll never forget that feeling of the way I heard his voice in the studio when it was actually recorded, and Jeff Forrest played it back, and I was like, oh my god, like this is so good. Um, and that quiet breakdown part to me is so beautiful and ugly and sad and hopeful all at the same time. And I love the messed up guitar parts, bass parts, and drum parts in this song. And when Jeff was like, oh, there's some flubs here and there, we were kind of like, like, this is us. Like, I want to, we want to keep it. This sounds like us live. Like, we're barely keeping it together anytime we play live. And this captures that. Like, so, and he was totally confused, but I love the song for that because it's perfectly imperfect and it represents so much of what this album is about. So to have that song be the intro to like what is about to come, I love it. I love the track.
I remember just writing that, and it was probably one of the more complex songs we'd come up with at the time. It had up and down volume parts, had a breakdown, got kind of quiet, came back out of that. I don't remember who wrote the lyrics. If I was to guess, I would say it was probably Todd and Rob, or Eric and Rob, maybe collaborating on that. But yeah, that was a good song that came together for creating a very good opening track to a record.
It's called D4 because that's the fourth song we wrote in drop D. That's where that came from. Before we had titles, it was just because it was a departure for us from like changing the tuning of the guitars. The first 5 or 6 songs was just D1, D2, D3, D4, D5, D6 before we had lyrics for it, titles. God, I was listening to it the other day because I'm like, I gotta get familiar with the songs again because got a show later this year. But just how sloppy the recording is. How the drums are absent halfway through. Yeah, I'm mainly thinking about. I'm just thinking about when these songs were introduced and just playing them in our living room, and just being really stoked.
Yeah, that was one of the few songs that actually I wrote all by myself. And that song, see, I had moved around my whole life, so I always had, in a weird way, a chance to reinvent myself because this is pre-social media, so you could kind of be a new person when you moved. But at the same time, I realized that I would borrow from other people's personalities and stuff like that. And the line that I always really am proud of is imitation gets us so far, but it kills from within. I still love that line. I still love that song. It's probably one of my favorites. And I wrote that song basically about the struggle of trying to be true to myself, even knowing that I could emulate and imitate and never be caught. But ultimately, it was only hurting me in the long run.
End of a lifetime.
End of a lifetime. Yeah, that was That's a tough one. You know, I just recently lost my parents, and anyway, like that song to me, Steve actually helped me write that too, and I remember that we were really trying to convey the sorrow of how we kind of in Western civilization kind of treat our elders and our older people, and I think we were trying to capture like the horror of like maybe, I don't know, not the horror, but I would say like maybe the realism of, we all die alone, unfortunately. And I think we were really dealing with that. We were trying to deal with how we were perceiving our elders, and hope that when we get to that time, we have someone that will kiss us one last time.
End of a Lifetime. I wrote the words and the music to that one. And Eric's grandfather, who I knew because Eric's grandparents lived up the street from me, had passed away from cancer. And I remember just Eric was really shooken by that. So I remember writing that song kind of for him, with the lyrics and dealing with like loved ones dying, people close to you dying. And notoriously, I definitely did steal a riff from Undertow, and they give me shit for it all the time, which is fine.
This is a hard song to play, I think, emotionally. It's not my favorite song on the record, not because I don't like the music or anything, but I just think the thought of losing someone, it's about losing family, and, it can also, to a degree represent losing friends. And to me, it's never easy to play emotionally, and it's one that always kind of makes me bummed when we play, but it's also very cathartic. Um, there's some good moments in there, and I like how it's a little disjointed. Some of the parts kind of shouldn't go together, but they somehow fit. And I think Eric and Steve did some really good, clever things musically with this song.
In the name of progression.
I love playing this song live. I love the lyrics. I think it holds true to this day, what the song is about, in that, only in death can you stop supporting corporations unless you want to live off the grid, basically. There's only so much you can do. And we thought that as kids, and here we are as adults, and it hasn't changed. Like, there's nothing you can do about it unless you want to be off the grid or go live someplace that doesn't have, corporate conglomerates running everything. So, lyrically, I find this still to be of the time, and musically, it's really fun to play live. It's real heavy, and I love the part when it does that breakdown, and it's just that shout out to "In the Name of Progression" towards the end. That part I always enjoy, when that part hits live. It's a good song. Yeah, that's my thoughts on that one.
That one I think was probably, I know Todd, I think that was a pretty good group effort. I think that was one of those songs that we just, felt like the hammer of corporate greed was just always hammering us in the head, constantly showing us what we don't have and what we need, when actuality, it's far from it. And I think we were just trying to convey like this sense of hopelessness of consumerism and corporate greed, and how it's almost inescapable.
Wow, that was fun. That was just, we're trying to that was just, how do we get a sing along in here? And again, it was one of those lyrics that were kind of, again, trying to be a departure, and like, what can we talk about that's not sort of the standard in hardcore? So getting into like environmental issues, like the song. That was one specifically I remember sitting in an RV with Dave, hashing it out.
Razor.
This is another ripper. I love the intro. I like how it gets super spazzy, Antioch Arrow in the middle with the "Give Me a Razor" part, and one thing, I didn't write all the lyrics to this, but I wrote the part that "Give me a razor," and with this, I give my wrist a kiss of steel part. And one of the things that I got inspiration from, I was, always into Misfits and Sam Hain and early Danzig stuff. And there's a song off Sam Hain, November Coming Fire, called Kiss of Steel. And that's where I got the Kiss of Steel line from for Razor. So, because I always thought that was an interesting way to talk about a car crash and things colliding. And I thought, like, well, what about the sadness and wanting to not feel pain and using a razor to kiss your skin? And I, that's kind of where I got the inspiration from for that Kiss of Steel line. And then the rest of it was truly about kind of crying out for help and letting people know, like, it's okay to feel pain and it's okay to be hurt and it's okay to be sad, but ask for help and reach out before it's too late. And it was kind of a song about mental health, but kind of before I really knew what that was. But live, again, a song that I really enjoy playing live, but definitely there's moments of it that take an emotional toll for, obvious reasons. We've lost a lot of people over the years. And so sometimes this stuff, it hurts when people don't ask for help, so yeah, that's my thoughts on it.
Razor. Yeah, that was actually mostly Rob, if I remember correctly. And yeah, he kind of he said that was how he kind of also, I would almost in the same way, I think. It's hard for me to paraphrase for someone, but I remember him saying, like, this is how he felt, just, being, again, just being inundated with this constant, like, need for consumerism and greed. And yeah, but Rob was actually the one who mostly wrote that, and it was it's a classic.
Razor, I wrote that one, and that was probably the most metallic song on the record. I mean, it's obvious with that riff, and it was just, I remember just playing that one, and that one always hooked the crowd. That was always like a good earworm kind of song. And I don't know, again, I'm going to lean towards Eric and or Rob writing lyrics to that one. Maybe Dave. Dave helped out a lot. I think he did a lot of editing with certain things to make it fit. But yeah, I think Eric and Rob probably wrote those lyrics.
Oh, that's a great song. That's one that just, to me, seems so iconic in a live set that we play. It just sounds seems instantly recognizable. A blend of just straight metal to almost like spazzy punk. So that was a total blend and inspired by our environment at the time.
Final Expression.
Final Expression, that one was mostly all Eric. I sometimes less words or more. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Well, that's where the Life, Live, Regret lyric came in. That's when. Sorry, you're going to hear a lawnmower back here. That's one of the ones I remember specifically seeing on a beat up piece of paper that Eric wrote at Denny's with, I think Mike Cheese was there with him. And he was kind of going through this stuff, and I was like, just kind of like, wow, your penmanship is terrible. But looking at the lyrics, I'm like, wow, this is really cool. I don't really understand what it's all about. I'm sure he does. But that kind of helped solidify, I guess, the concept of the album.
Eric wrote, that's the one song. So when I say 50% him, 50% me, that's the song that's split because it's a 9-song record. And he wrote music to the first half. I wrote the second part of it. And that's definitely an Eric lyric song. Just riding with the idea of suicide, which is, kind of I don't want to say like foreshadow by any means, but I mean, it was like kind of, we just, yeah, fuck, I don't know. That's heavy stuff when I think about it. I try not to think about that too much in that sense, I guess. I don't know.
I really like this version of Final Expression. I think it captures like what the song should have been when we were kind of quote unquote demoing it for another release. I think about Eric, and on this song a lot. The Final Expression part, especially at the end, when they're yelling, the final expression is giving up. That stuff hurts. And I think that it really has a lot of emotional gravitas, how it's being yelled at the end. Just hearing this sad voice, like basically crying towards the end. And I think that that's really captures the essence of the song and this record.
Blanket.
Yes, Blanket. I remember me, Todd, and I think Steve worked on this one, if I remember correctly, and we wrote that song to view of how we don't necessarily feel the need to have hubris in stating what deities or gods exist or don't exist. And instead, that song was less to do with religion, more of respecting yourself and ultimately knowing that you have to rely on yourself. And again, it wasn't denouncing or condoning any religion. It was more of a song suggesting that you can use religion as a blanket or as a crutch to try to justify your own actions, but at the end of the day, you can save yourself. You can also help yourself.
Yeah, so with Blanket, I talked a little about this. I mean, I think that it was our anti-religious song. It was about, we felt that religion was being like shoved into something that we thought was supposed to be like anti-establishment, and it was being, I guess, commandeered, so to speak, back then. You had various religious movements all vying for kids' attention, And this was kind of our response to that, of like, well, let people think for themselves. Like, you know, like the only thing that's going to save us is us. Like, you know, some person in the sky isn't going to come down and suddenly save everybody, you know? And that's what this song was about. It was about this blanket of serenity. Like it doesn't exist, but what does exist is the here and now with people and friends and family, and having those strong bonds and relationships, and having that as your serenity, and having that as your security, and having that as your positivity. Um, that's what that song was about. And, you know, like I said, the music is so angry and so pissed off that when you layer the lyrics on top of it, it just, they really complement each other. And Dave's cadence to the song just creates this like real like death march backlash to religion. And that's what we wanted out of that. And that's what I feel we captured.
Blanket is a heavy song to me. That's one of my favorite intros. Eric wrote that one. Lyrics, I have no idea. Probably one of those guys, but yeah, that's just a good. It's just a good intro. I like that song.
Recluse.
Recluse. This song was like probably my least favorite song on the record. I still like it very much, but it is my least favorite on the record. I think that it plods along a little bit in a way that kind of doesn't make sense, and there's these weird gaps that I don't think we were good enough to mathematically play, but somehow by a thread kept it together. So there's these weird time signatures to that song that now we can play just fine. But back then, I don't know what we were thinking. We were definitely getting a little mathy with some of the time signatures on that song. And I think it takes a little bit of the punch out of that, out of kind of the momentum of the song. You know, towards the end, I think it kind of dials in, but that whole middle part, the whole beginning into the middle, it kind of plods along at this weird pace that I don't think like lends itself to being a fun listen, but I still enjoy the song.
I wrote pretty much most all that one. I remember writing that one. That I wrote at Todd's house. Him and his girlfriend were living, and they were nice enough to let me crash on the floor. Thank goodness. And that was, to be honest, the truth for you, that was one of the ones I was written very last minute. But being an only child my whole life, I've always had a strong sense of being able to entertain myself. And I wrote that basically after being in a bad relationship, and I, in a way, wanted to condone the dual nature of wanting to be alone, but also being, also knowing that that I ultimately know that it's not good for me to be alone. So I wrote that song about really the dual nature of, you know, silence brings me peace, darkness brings me comfort. It's ultimately about, you know, knowing that I can be an introvert and knowing that I can handle the pain, but also at the same time knowing that I really do want to reach out. At the end of the day, most humans seek love, and I'm no different.
Recluse is Todd. I remember Todd wrote those lyrics, and I don't know. I mean, it's just another heavy song. And I mean, one of the things that I was bringing into the the songwriting was a lot of the guitar harmonies to kind of add that Slayer element to it. And that song is definitely, there's parts where it's in there and it just kind of creates that texture. That's very textured, I'd say.
Recluse. That's one where we kind of go back and forth. I think the song's okay. I think it's maybe it feels a little monotonous, a little slow playing live. We've sometimes, let's not play it, or like we've played it. I'd probably say that on the Life Live Regret album, that might be my least favorite. Probably because I just don't have a connection to it. Maybe that was probably written the quickest. Again, not a bad song.
The setup.
Yes, the setup. That one, if I remember correctly, was mostly Eric, and he wrote that. That was one of the very early songs that we did in D4. I think Blanket and Setup were the first. Yeah, they were the first two that we did in Drop D. I'm sorry, I might have said D4, but anyway, they were the first two songs we did in Drop D, and it's a great song. It really is. Call it a straight edge song or whatever. But again, the booze and all this stuff, it's always marketed as rebellion, and we viewed it as a setup. It was a setup to capture and it's a setup of like trying to market this rebellion of getting fucked up and stuff. So that was, I think, if anything, maybe that was Eric's retort to that.
That for me is probably the hardest to play because there's both noise and feedback happening before, like during, when the riff starts with a so I really have to listen to that, and I'm not counting into it, which is probably stupid. Maybe I should. So I'm really like, it's just like kind of chaos. What I hear when I'm playing it, there's this kind of chaos, and then I'm just like watching, and I usually can't hear. Usually the monitors, the sounds are all over the place. So usually watching Steve, I'm like, okay, is he playing yet? We got to make eye contact. And he's like, maybe he'll wink at me or something, like, okay, now we're going. And I kind of go into it. But again, it's kind of like we're just doing, kind of blending the maybe metal aspects of what we're doing or hardcore into just more of a kind of a noise punk avenue, which is like I'm just doing like these chop beats in there that are really fast, kind of like conjuring like an ebullition sound or something like that.
Yeah, so the setup is our I would say probably the one straight edge song on the record, and it's about just kind of rejecting the ideal that it's like Monday Night Football, drink up, it's frat party time, and it wasn't that we were trying to be against really anything other than like you're just literally set up in life to do Monday Night Football, have beers with the guys, and play golf, and have martinis, on Saturday, whatever it is, right? There's all these commercials and media and all these things. I mean, it's still here. It's not like it's gone away, but it was ads to smoke, ads to drink. It was like get wasted on punk. It was all these different things that you whether you saw it on television or in a magazine or whatever else. So this was kind of our response to being like, from the time you're born, you're set up to just be a certain way, especially here in America. And there's this kind of advertising funnel, and there's this expectation funnel of you're a man, you're supposed to do these things. You're a woman, you're supposed to do those things, and the world is not that straightforward. And, I think that back then there was a lack of understanding of like non-binary people, and there was a lack of understanding of, well, some people don't want to like call themselves a man. Some people don't want to drink beers and watch Monday Night Football, right? So you're just set up and conditioned to like think these things and live this way. And this was kind of our rejection of kind of normal, quote unquote, society expectations of those things.
That was, I think the setup might be one of the first songs we wrote when we switched to that tuning. And again, I just remember we were a straight edge band, but we didn't really care about being a straight edge band. But that was probably one of the more like politically charged straight edge lyrical content songs that we had, talking more about just systemic problems with abuse and stuff versus just being like, hey, I'm straight edge, I'm cool or whatever.
Curtain.
Curtain again. That was Eric. That was him writing about a relationship that he had got out of. Your love is like a curtain you will hide behind the rest of your life. Great lyrics, great song. Yeah, it's that was mostly Eric. It's a really great song about, just like dealing with someone being false and fake with you, in the dynamic of love.
Curtain was tough. Again, I wrote 2 songs for Eric on that record, and that's another one. I wrote the words and the music for that, and he had dealt with his first relationship as a teenager went south, and of course, when we're teenagers, we think it's life and death when that shit happens. And he was very distraught, and so I wrote that song for him, and it kind of dealt with the subject matter, because not only did the girl leave him, but she left him for a friend. So it was kind of an extra sting. And that was kind of some of the subject matter in there.
Super emotional song to play. Not really, let's say some of it has to do with lyrical content, but it is just one of those very improvised songs. I think even recording it, we just had like a kind of a loose idea, loose structure, and maybe 50% of the song is just improvised on that recording and also live. I don't think we play it the same time, the same way twice. So hearing, it kind of makes my skin crawl, but like hearing Eric screaming at the end is really difficult. I remember him doing it. I remember how emotional he always was. So it's really hard to hear that. Even like the other day, I was again like trying to get familiar with the music again. Not like I don't know these songs that I played a million times, but just trying like, okay, I gotta maybe get into shape and I gotta play these songs again. So let me just get more familiar. And just hearing that and always startles me, I guess. Especially I'm listening to it on headphones, where you really pick up a lot of the mistakes and sort of live nuances to that recording that maybe just playing it on your stereo, whatever, you won't hear. But when you put headphones on, you can hear just little tweaks or guitar feeds from one side or someone talking or laughing on another one. But that one, I remember him just felt like he was in anguish. And it was real.
So Curtain is exactly what it was supposed to be. There was rough sketches of a song structure. Maybe about a minute and a half of it was like a song structure, and the rest was completely freeform, and just done off feeling. There was no structure after about a minute and a half, it kind of just loses itself, and it kind of goes into just noise and repetition and different kind of atmospheric noises, and Eric screaming his head off, and it was exactly what it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be this emotional crescendo of ending the record in a way where everything just falls apart. Like relationships fall apart, life falls apart. It was this like cathartic exit to the record of all systems collapse, like everything goes. And it was interesting because I was talking to my brother about this a few weeks ago, and he brought up something that I forgot until he brought it up. But when we were recording Curtain and Eric was screaming everything at the end and just giving it his all, Jeff accidentally didn't have his line live, so he didn't record it. So he had Eric do it all over again. So what you hear on the record is actually the second take. And I think what I remember from that, though, was that Eric was so angry and so upset that it actually probably came out better the second time. He had some lyrics and things like that he was screaming and yelling, and some of it was just guttural hurt at the time. And I just remember going in to the control room with Jeff after kind of looking at Eric like screaming in the sound booth, and Jeff was like, wow, like this is, I've never heard anything like this, and because he hadn't, so it was, we were all kind of floored. And I remember just kind of like, wow, like we're done. That's it, and I think that, the song being as long as it is, it just ended up that way. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 10 minutes. Like, we just went until it felt normal to just stop. And I think Curtain's an extremely beautiful song, for what it is. And I don't think it would have the same feel if we didn't just go in after that first minute and a half of structured music and just freeform the whole way through. There wasn't any sort of looks or nods. We were just kind of, everyone was in their own zone doing it. And I've never done anything like that since. And it was a real fascinating look at when you have 5 people in a room that are extremely connected on multiple different levels. You can do something really incredible and really emotional. And I just didn't expect the output of what we did on Curtain to actually sound the way it did until we actually heard the playback. So it was cool.
Is the first take what's on the record?
For Curtain?
Yes.
Yeah, the music, yes. And then Dave's vocals, however many takes that took to get through it, I don't remember. But Eric's part towards the end, that's the second take.
How do you go about deciding to go back to Jeff Forrest and Double Time Studios?
We just had a rapport with him. I think, he had done so many San Diego bands at that point, because when we did Ritual, his recording studio was out of his house. He had a little office with like a music room, and then he had a control room in the kitchen. And So Ritual was recorded at his house. That's where Double Time was. And then he actually got a warehouse in Santee and moved it there. And we just had a good rapport with him. Whether he's the best engineer or the best, I don't know, but we just knew that we got along with him. He kind of understood us. And we could just trust him to a degree. So it just felt comfortable to go in there and record that with him instead of going to like For the Record, which we ended up, doing later. But, I think for that album, it made sense to go there.
It just became convenient. It was local. We did the first, we did Ritual with him. And I don't know, it just became like, oh, well, that's what we know. Everybody's going there. All the Gravity bands were going there. Anti-Cara went there. Heroin went there. And then because we did Ritual at his house, he had the studio in his home, and then he moved into a proper industrial complex where he built a real studio. And that's when we started. I don't know, it just became a thing because the last 7 inch we did in Orange County at a different studio. But Jeff Jeff Forrest, who did Double Time, that just became the place. Like all our bands went there, all of them.
Any other memories of being in the studio that we haven't touched on?
Yeah, I mean, there was a fight in the studio. Eric and Steve were like pissed off about a part, and then it turned into a row. Like, they like almost beat each other up in the hallway of the studio, and Jeff comes running out of the control room like, stop it, hey, like, freaking out because, there's equipment everywhere and stuff like that. But, it got broken up real quick. It wasn't like some bloody, fisticuffs, but, they definitely got in a fight. And I also think like there was also a lot of laughter, just a lot of joking around and trying to, lighten the mood a little bit, because there was times I think things just got kind of heavy. So, kind of joking around and trying to lighten things up. But, by and large, the record was done pretty quick. I think it was done over like 4 days. And it was recorded for like $700 or something. So it wasn't a very expensive record to record. And yeah, it was a magical moment. And, I don't think I would change a thing other than, maybe, maybe, yeah, you know what? I wouldn't change anything. I love it for what it is. So I wouldn't change any of it.
I'll be honest with you. There was a lot of tension whenever Unbroken recorded. Usually it was Eric against the rest of us. He was very controlling and domineering and sometimes borderline neurotic on what he thought wasn't coming through, which later on he himself had admitted like he was, it came out fine. He was just being paranoid, I suppose. I don't know. I don't want to speak for him in that sense or put words in his mouth, but we goofed around a lot. We fought a lot. We argued a lot. We were very passionate about what we were doing. And it was just, sometimes fun and sometimes very tense. I mean, we were a family of people. It was like, a brotherhood in the sense where you fight like brothers do. And even at times it would come close to getting physical.
We didn't really spend a lot of time in the studio, especially Life, Live, Regret. That was maybe, God, I'm sure Rob has a better memory. I would say like it was no more than 3 days. I think we did most of the music in one day. Trying to think why we did that. I think we're trying to capture the feel of a live show, realizing that if we tried to sort of tighten the screws, it wouldn't work. I think we tried in the very beginning, but it wasn't working. So again, just trying to be just a little bit more organic, and true to what the experience would be, being with us live. It was really quick. Goofed around most of the time. but not really knowing a lot about the recording process or like what the possibilities are, or how much money we're spending or this and that. So we just kind of just went in and it almost felt like what I read about, the Ramones recording their first album. They, did it 45 minutes, like, peace, we're out. I just took the money. Not that we had any money to take, but we just did it really quick.
For the groundwork split you tuned to B, how do you settle in on the tuning for Life, Love, Regret?
Well, it's not really B. It's like a very improper. We didn't have tuners. We were trying to be in D. I'd say if anything, we're probably C sharp maybe, and that's just an accident. It's just probably not having tuners and someone going give me an A, and someone tunes to somebody else's guitar, and that's the result.
All I remember is Eric and Steve saying, "Okay, everything's going to be in D now," and then I learned how to tune into drop D. And that was just like how we stayed for every song we wrote after that moment. I think D just made more sense. I think it still sounded dark and nasty without being over the top, without sounding, like Obituary or Cannibal Corpse or something, so it kind of made more sense. I think for us, you can get a little bit of like rock and roll out of it and some, still brutal heavy hardcore with drop D. So, we definitely, I think, found that staying in that tuning just really suited what we were going to do from there on out.
Was there any ethos for this recording? Like, for instance, I once heard a rumor that you guys had agreed that you would do a maximum 2 takes on a song.
No ethos like that at all. It was, record it live and play our asses off, and how it sounds, unless there was some like atrocious, like, oh man, like I didn't even play bass at that part, unless there was those types of things, we didn't redo the take. They were, some songs I think were done in like 1 or 2 takes. Other songs were done in like 6 or 7 takes. Yeah, but there was no kind of like, it's got to be 2 or less. It was, if it sounds good, then roll with it. And if we think we could play it better, then let's play it better. That's kind of how it was.
The 4 of us did the music together, and then Eric and I collectively did our overdubs at the same time as well. And it definitely added to that live element of the record. And there's a lot of flaws, but they were left in there. That's just kind of, we left it as is. It captured who we were. We weren't a tight band. We weren't some of the best players either. And it shows on there. And I think, in my opinion, it gives it like a level of sincerity. It's not something where, you spend all this time trying to nail the perfect take. It's kind of like, fuck it. That's it. All right. That's what we're keeping it. That's the way it's going to be. And, yeah, I can hear all the, discrepancies, but they don't bother me. They sound like they belong there.
To dig into the nitty gritty of you guys recording the music for this live, what do you remember about that? Like, are you looking at each other? Are your backs to each other? Are you set up like you're playing a show? How is that all?
Yeah, no, we were set up kind of in a circle, all facing each other. Like, all our amps were in closets. Todd had his kit out and had a few baffles up, but we could all see each other. And yeah, and it was great because we could just look at each other and play and kind of know when part changes were coming. And, it wasn't like anyone was like jumping around in the studio and going nuts like a live show, but it definitely, I think, gave it that feel because we were all looking at each other as if we were on stage, and I think that shows even in some of the sloppiness that we decided, no, that's us, let's just keep it. I think that I think that approach really lended itself to the recording because I think, I don't know. I've never been, at least every band I've been in, I've never been one to be like, okay, like let's just do the drums first and then let's just do the guitar. And I always just liked being in a room with everybody and just feeding off each other and getting that energy and synergy going. I always found that lend itself to good recording sessions and a more realistic way of how things are. And it was definitely us in a room all staring at each other, with amps in various closets of his studio.
Did any of the songs come out better or worse than you expected going in?
I thought they all came out great for what they are. I think that, aside from Recluse, I think that the kind of weird mathiness of it here and there, I don't think we were ready for it. We pulled it off, but I don't think we were as ready for it as we thought we were at the time. But overall, like it came out how we wanted. It, I don't think the songs could have sounded any better. It is what it's supposed to be. And I'm personally 100% happy with that record. Like I said, I wouldn't change anything on it. I think the songs came out great. I think they showcase what we could be capable of as a band and the type of lyrical content of the record, I think really helped push the songs to another level. And I don't know, I think that's why the record still resonates with people. I'm not saying it's the biggest record ever by any means, but it still resonates with people. And there's a reason for that, because the songs came out in a way that means something, to us, and it was sincere. And I think people can feel that through the record.
D4, I would say, turned out worse for me. Again, you're going to hear different opinions. For me, it's the worst. But it's the ones that I felt really captured what we were trying to do, and sort of that, again, going back to that live experience. So Final Expression, Curtain, those I felt really, feel like we did the best job, like bringing that across in presenting something that was, I guess, the truest to the intent of when we're playing it. But again, like I said, like Curtain, how improvised that was. And I listened to it today, and it just feels, I have an emotional connection to that song.
Did any of the songs come out better or worse than you expected going in?
End of a Lifetime was really interesting. I did a dual vocal thing on that, where I did it sounds like it's on a delay where I say I'm dead, but it's not. I actually like split the timing on the takes, and I'm actually I was always really happy about that for something, and it was something I kind of did on accident, but the guys were like, "Oh, that's so cool," and I never really fessed up to it, but I was happy that worked out good. The whole album, nothing turned out bad. I in a weird way wish we could, maybe it'd be nice to go back to find the tape and remaster it or something, but that's wishful thinking. But I mean, again, though, for the time being, it's I don't listen to it often because that sounds kind of, but every once in a while I listen and I'm like, it still does good,
How involved was the band with the mix?
We were all there, I think we kind of, make comments here and there. Jeff definitely like took the helm and kind of ran with it as best he could, and then he would like give us, cassettes, and we'd go to listen to it, a car stereo, a home stereo, and then we'd come back and like mix a little more, to kind of just see what it sounds like, because everything sounds great in studio monitors, right? But does it sound good in your car that doesn't have studio monitors, or your home stereo that doesn't have, $5,000 studio monitors, right? So, it was, does this capture what we wanted to capture in the mix? Like, is anything buried in a way that doesn't lend itself to being something special? Is anything overpowering something and not letting something else more special shine through on the record? And I think through the mix and people kind of having, a say here and there, and working with Jeff a lot on it, I think that he captured what we were looking to get out of the record.
Pretty involved. For what we knew, I mean, you're talking about 5 kids who have no real understanding of EQ and mixing, and things that I personally know now. It's a world of difference compared to what because I was 18 when we did that record. You just kind of sit back and, oh, make that louder. Oh, that's too loud. Oh, let's do that. Like, you didn't really get the concept of how you mix a record. And then the dude, Jeff, that's engineering it, he probably didn't like any of the music we were doing. He probably didn't like a lot of the music the bands that were coming to him were doing. But it was his job. We were paying him for a service. Yeah, I mean, we just, let's try this or let's try this, but it wasn't like a super in-depth, nobody knew what the fuck they were talking about.
When and how do you decide on the sequencing of the songs for the record?
That I don't remember that part. I don't remember the sequencing other than I wanted D4 to open. I think we were all on that same page, and we wanted Curtain to be the end. But how songs kind of shook out the rest of it, I'm not really sure how we sequenced it the way we did, other than we knew what the first song was going to be and what the last song was going to be.
It was a non-decision that Curtain was going to be last from the get-go. I remember that. There was that's a good question. I remember us talking about it. I don't think we really. I don't know if I had a lot to do with that conversation, if I remember correctly, to be honest with you. But to me, I knew that we were going to do Curtain last. And I'm pretty sure we talked about D4 first, but other than that, I didn't remember. I didn't remember a lot of other discussions about that, to be honest with you, Zach. Sorry about that.
How did it feel to hear the songs for the first time played back to you in the studio?
I felt inspired. I felt that we did something special. I felt that we took what we thought hardcore could be and shake it up a little bit and say, yeah, it's still a hardcore record, but it fits right in line with, Slayer and Throbbing Gristle, or, the Smiths and Integrity. It kind of has all these elements of things that we like, and I felt that the mood of what we wanted was captured. And to me, that's what mattered. Are the songs good, and do you feel something when you listen to this record? And that's what I remember walking away with, like when I heard it in the studio, of like, wow, this is everything we wanted it to be. And I felt inspired, like, wow, we did something, and I hope people like it, and if not, this is going to resonate with somebody somewhere, and little did we know that it would.
Well, it's interesting because, yeah, I mean, I remember listening. I remember there was a lot of we were tracking and others, and people had certain days where they were doing their other parts and stuff like that. I think, I remember us all listening, and I think I remember it correctly. I think we had Hartsfield, maybe it came down or something. I do remember us, we were at a studio listening, and I remember he was pleased, but I remember, ironically enough, playing it to my friend. And honestly, I don't remember necessarily the music party, but I remember my friend just being like looking at me like kind of with this like wow look on his face. And I was like, "What's up?" And he's like, "Man, you guys are on another level." And I was like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, you guys are definitely better in every way." And I remember him saying that. And I think to me, that was like the first time I was like, huh, yeah, we maybe did something good. You never really know, you're always, especially at that age, you're just surrounded by self-doubt and stuff. But like I said, we put so much pressure on ourselves. It made sense that it should have turned out pretty good. We really put a lot of effort into it.
Do you remember the first time that you were able to listen to the record alone by yourself and what your feelings may have been?
Yeah. I remember, finally getting the first pressing and putting it on my god awful turntable. But at the time, now I have like techniques and all nice stuff. But anyway, back then I put it on, and I think it was like a York stereo or something, and it just kind of blew me away. It's crazy when you go. Life is a weird cycle sometimes. But yeah, I just kind of remember thinking like, wow, I just never would have thought I would have had a full length record out. Like being a band as a full length. I just never really. You got to understand, when I moved out to San Diego, I was in the Navy, and I was kind of like, well, the days of having fun and being in bands are over. I didn't really plan on that. That wasn't part of the plan. And now I express myself musically still, because it's not something I kind of have to do. It's just, I like writing music. It's like one of those things at the end of the day, I feel like, you can make money, but nobody's going to remember you for the money you make. They might remember you for a song you wrote.
I went up to Orange County, got a test press from Mike, and came home and put it on. And that was the first time I got to listen to it, like on vinyl in my room. And I just remember like looking at some of the printed lyrics that I had, just like lyric sheets and stuff, in a book that I had with a couple of the lyrics that I had written, and just reading those pages and listening to Dave's voice with some of the lyrics that I'd written, and just being floored. Like I didn't know what this album would mean to people. And again, I'm not saying it's the biggest thing in the world, but it resonates with enough people that it means something, and it meant something to me. And I felt that, well, even if we don't do anything else after this, I felt that this was our potential pinnacle of what hardcore could be. And, from Unbroken's point of view, and that I felt that we did something that was a little bit challenging. It challenged what, kind of regular hardcore was. I think that I remember thinking that we did something that pushed beyond what a normal hardcore song could be, while still sounding hardcore. So yeah, I had a lot of thoughts back then. And then I remember being scared. Like, is anyone even going to like this thing? And we were proud of it. We were super proud of it. I remember Hartsfield being really proud of it. Our friends that heard it were really proud of it. So I was still scared. Are we going to be even more outcasts than we already were in hardcore for looking the way we did, and now sounding like this? I remember being kind of scared too.
Yeah, I think it just sounded very, very organic. I think even how the things I appreciate about it now, I was probably hoping it was a little tighter than it is. So just hearing just bad drumming or guitars feeding in and out where they're not supposed to, or a lyric sounding off. So I kind of like really focus on the mistakes at first. So that was really kind of in my head. I knew what the song should sound like, and so hearing that, I was like, oh man, we fucked that up. Especially hearing like, around like a couple years before it was, the Judge album came out, and I remember hearing that. It's like, whoa, that sounded so overproduced compared to other bands. So if that was the standard, we were nowhere near that. So you just hearing that, I was like, damn. But again, it was real, and sort of over time, I was probably, along with people that picked up on the album as having it feel really special and having a connection to it. Like I was along with them. Like it's different. It was different sort of growing into the legacy of that album versus being a participant in it. It felt different. So to me, it's definitely aging well.
What are your thoughts on the art for the album?
I love the art for the record. I like how dark it came out. I like the pictures that were used. It just made sense at the time, and it still makes sense now, 20 something years on, whatever, however long it's been, almost 30 years at this point. So for me, looking at that album cover and how it's just plain in the back, there's not this crowds diving on each other. There's not all this wild stuff. It's just a very plain jacket with some photos on it. I think aesthetically it fit the mood of the record. Like you could tell by looking at it what you were about to get into. There was nothing overly happy looking about the record, and there was nothing that told you, oh, this is just a straight up hardcore record, or this is a metal record, or this is an emo record. Like there was no indicators of what it really was, other than if you knew the label, you knew it was hardcore or hardcore adjacent. And, I remember thinking, I hope people give this record a chance because this doesn't look like a hardcore record from the outside.
I didn't in the beginning. I didn't like it. I liked the imagery that we had, but I think I probably wanted something really generic, like just a live shot in the front, with the name, something that people could understand, maybe something that we look like or would experience. So something not very creative. So something like that. I was sort of like, okay, that's fine. I didn't want to push anything, but then it probably took a few years after that where it really came together for me. Like not after we recorded it, probably probably took a couple years, but of kind of understanding the, how cohesive and sort of conceptual it was. it made a lot of sense. So I don't know if that was by chance or Steve, Rob, Eric knew this going into it, but it just made sense later on.
Art's good. I like the concept of it. I like the fact that it was the cover wasn't very it was kind of low budget without being low budget. There was not a lot to it. I do like the inside, the insert where everybody had a hand in something. Everyone got a page. As silly as some of it is now, when you look back at it, but it was relevant at the time. Just the concept, it was cool. I think it was different. It was unique. And it just kind of showed who we were, not only as a band, but probably as individuals as well.
Yeah, that I love it. I mean, I remember I was kind of wild because after recording, we were all like in the studio, and Eric proposed what he wanted to do with the layout and everything. And I just kind of remember thinking, I actually did some paintings actually for the cover of Life, Love, Regret, but they were kind of dark, and I'm kind of glad, like, but I remember, he said he wanted to do the pictures, and, basically in his head, he had pretty much a lot of that stuff. And it was good enough that none of us were going to argue or fight him over it. The thing of the funny thing to me about that is when Eric, the proposed layout design, you gotta understand, like, this is way back in the day, and we were very adamant to Hartsfield from New Age Records that Eric was like, we each get our own page, so that way if you want to thank a million people on there, you can do it. And the funny thing about it is I did a painting for mine, and I put kind of pictures. I put the "We Live and Die with Our Opinions" painting on that, and which ended up being a song lyric later on for Unbroken. But that the irony of it was Eric, I didn't think had a lot of I don't think he had a lot of hope for me. I think he thought I was going to turn in something really lame and stupid or something. But I remember him later on going up to me. He's like, "You know what?" He's like, "Yours was the best one." And I was like, "I don't think anyone's is the best one." He's like, "No." He's like, yours was really good. He's like, I didn't expect you to do that. He's like, "I didn't think you had it in you. That's pretty awesome." And that was one of those, you didn't get a lot of attaboys from Eric Allen, but if you did, you definitely remembered him.
Do you prefer the color scheme on the first or the second press?
That's a good question. I do like the baby blue a little better, if I'm being honest. I do remember the first pressing. It was really kind of hard to see one of the pictures, but it's really neat that I'm glad they kind of did change that, because you had something to. It's just amazing, and I'm very fortunate. Again, I never thought I'd be a part of something where people were like, getting different pressings of it and stuff. And, there's a guy I talk to every once in a while online, and he's got like everything we've done. I'm like, I don't even have that. Like, I was in the band.
It's funny because the second press was supposed to be the original version, that baby blue. That was supposed to be the first press, but I don't know, there was a film screw up and the jacket showed up and we were leaving on tour, and it was this super dark, crazy color, almost black. You could see the pictures, but they were really dark. I kind of prefer that version, to be honest, because it doesn't look happy. It doesn't look like it looks even less like a hardcore record because it's so dark, right? Where the second press, I like the colors, I think it looks cool with the baby blue, but I prefer the original press more.
Who came up with the concept of each band member having their own page in the layout and to be able to choose what they wanted to express?
I think it was Todd who came up with that. Either Todd or Eric. One of those two guys came up with that concept of, hey, yeah, we'll have a lyric sheet with some pictures, but like, let's do a booklet. Almost like the idea was actually to create a fanzine and we'd each have a page. And then Mike took it a step further and said, well, hey, the recording was so cheap. Like, let's splurge on the layout and let's add a bunch of panels. And, instead of like a booklet, like I'll just make a separate insert that, it kind of replicates what you guys want, but it'll be like high quality. So we went with that. And then everyone kind of got a page to kind of just express themselves. So people kind of got a glimpse of like who we are as individuals and like things that are important to us or things that have happened to us or what we feel about certain things. It was kind of our way of saying like we're putting everything out here, including ourselves. And I for better for worse, this is what it is, and this is who we are at this point in time. And I love that insert. I'm glad it's not reprinted anymore because a lot of things have changed since then for a lot of people. However, it is still a really cool time capsule of like who we are as kids at that time and what was going on in our lives and what we were into.
How do you personally feel about your page?
It's interesting. I haven't looked at it in a long time, and there's people on there that I thank, and there's people on there that I miss. There's people there that I don't miss. But I think what I love about my page most is like the records and all the things that are on the floor of my page. So you can kind of see like this is what I'm into. Like I'm into, punk and hardcore, but I love the Smiths and the Misfits and Sam Hain and all this stuff. And, I collect old turntables and things like that. So for me, it was like, I love that part of my page very much. I just thought it was almost like a yearbook photo that I'm not embarrassed of. I'm just like, yeah, that was me. Probably, a few weeks before I even recorded Life of Regret, I think that photo was taken. So, that photo was taken, I think, like 2 or 3 weeks before we even went into the studio. So it was just kind of cool to, find that photo of me and then, just kind of put together stuff of, for the panel of, what we wanted to do. Because we kind of had some loose ideas for things, but not much. But I remember it was either Steve or Todd saying, oh, like, when we get to the layout, we should do like a zine with our own pages and stuff. And that's when I kind of took that photo and kind of arranged stuff to kind of get ready for my zine page. So I had it all ready, and yeah, I don't know. It's cool to have that stuff, especially because I still use Murray's grease in my hair. So it's kind of cool to have a can back then, and I still use that stuff to this day.
One thing funny about it and one thing unfunny about it. So, but I'm glad you asked that. Thank you. The funny thing about it was when I mailed it, I had I had taken this contact sheet and kind of burned the photos and put them around the edge of the human body figure. And when I sent it, I guess part of the glue had maybe moved, and one of the pictures had kind of like just migrated into the middle of the chest of the character. And luckily, it didn't, cover the text that I needed it to cover or anything. But that wasn't supposed to be like that, and that was kind of funny because Eric was like, Eric was like, "Well, you didn't even put me on here," and I was like, "There you are," and blah blah. Your picture moved and stuff, and I remember us kind of laughing about that. That was a good memory, and but the not so funny thing about it is I desperately wish I had that. I sent that in for the layout under the condition that it would be mailed back to me immediately after being, scanned and all this stuff. And I have no idea where that thing is. And it bums me out so much because I don't do a ton of paintings. And whoever has that, if you stumble upon it, please, I got some Unbroken stuff for you. I would love to have that back.
Obviously, it's such a time capsule of who we are as these kids and what was important to us, right? So some of us was about a relationship. I think mine was just kind of just pushing back on just the whole. If you're not this, if you're not vegan, you're not straight edge or something like that. It's it just got really ridiculous. So funny, just like how a scene could just divide itself up into these crazy genres and move away from the community it could be,
The page is silly. That's what I meant when I said looking back. What I said earlier about Eric and relationship stuff, like obviously when you're a teenager, they're enormous. Like feelings are enormous. Emotions are enormous. You're just figuring shit out. So, you find out who you are. And so there's some corniness in that, especially on my end. Like, I added a picture of my then girlfriend. I tried to write something about, the current state of my life or whatever. And I honestly, I haven't looked at that in years. I don't even know what I said, anymore, but it's probably something that just like felt like it was the size of the world at the time of doing it. But looking back at it now, it's probably, not as it's probably more melodramatic, I guess, in the grand scheme of things.
Was anyone critical of another band member's page?
No, not at all. No, it was really cool that it was just neat to see it all come together and just see what everyone wrote, I think personally, Todd's is my favorite page. Just like he just says so much ill shit and it's so funny. And, but yeah, nobody was like critical. It was a really cool way to just say, this is who we are. And it was very, well received by other members of the band, and it was released in a very kind of non-judgmental way.
What are your thoughts on the completed album?
It's perfect to me. It's perfect. I love the songs, the recording, the layout, the mood. I like the album title. I like the way Life, Love, Regret is written. I love that Mike kind of took some rough sketches and concept ideas and was really able to make something come to life. And again, as a whole, I wouldn't change anything. I love the record. I'm very proud of that record.
I'm proud of it. It really blows me away that you're talking to me about it now. It was important to us when we did it. I think by the time we played our last show with Eric, not a reunion show, there was a lot of people at the Che Cafe and people on the roof and stuff like that, and that was a little eye opening to us. Like, whoa, we're making an impact here. But we did feel that we were stepping away from that band at our peak. That's like we're peaking right now. Let's just stop because we're not going to do anything else better than this. And it just took off from there, and it just keep growing. When I meet people and they find out I was in Unbroken, they're just like, "Oh my God, this is such an amazing band. It meant so much to me." I'm like, "Oh, okay." That's amazing. The fact that it still resonates with people is incredible, because we are, I'm almost 50. So I'm like, wow, this made a difference. Super proud of that. And I'm very humbled by it.
What was the reaction of your friends at the time, and also fans of Unbroken?
Well, I mean, friends are friends. They'll be like, they support you, and, people liked it, and they sang along and bought merch and, do the things that good friends do. They support you, and it's great. And you take it for what it is. It's your friend supporting you, and you're happy for that support. And it's really cool. I think what was different is we didn't know what people were going to think, because the album was about to come out. It was supposed to come out about a month or two before we left on the 94 tour with Undertow. And our first show was in Huntington Beach. And the album was out, but somehow we didn't get any copies yet. And cassettes were floating around because the cassette was out of it. So we didn't know what was going on, but when we got to the show, Mike had some stuff for us and was going to ship some stuff to someone on the East Coast. So by the time we got there, we'd have a bunch of LPs to sell on our way back across the States. But in SoCal, some people kind of had it already, but we didn't know what the reaction, because there was no internet, there was no nothing. And I'm kind of glad there wasn't internet, because we'd probably get, lamb goat bombs thrown at us, but I just didn't know what people were going to think. And then we played in Huntington Beach, and some people clearly already had copies of the album, even before we did. And then when we started, it was like all hell broke loose, and we're like, oh my God, people know these new songs. Oh my God, people are losing their minds. And it just made us hyped, like, this could be really cool. And then we went on to the next show, and it was the same thing. And the shows were just bigger and bigger and bigger. And by the time we got to places like, Chicago and Buffalo and, Syracuse and DC, it was just like, holy shit, like people really like us. People really like this record. And almost after every show, kids would come up and talk to us about the lyrics and talk to us about what it means to them, and that they don't feel alone, and that someone understands a depression and heartache and family loss and love loss and all these things. So it was emotionally heavy, but also beautiful that people were willing to come up to us and talk to us about it all the time. And it was eye-opening to be like, wow, like, we're not alone, and people feel just like us. And it felt really cool to have that be the reaction that we saw in the States and across Europe.
I felt that it was generally well received. Speaking of Mike Cheese, I remember coming back from recording and having, the copy on the tape of, I don't know if it was all the songs, it might have been. And he was just begging us, like, I got to hear it. And I think it must have been at Eric's house. And he just put two massive stereo speakers. He just lied down on the ground and put two massive stereo speakers on either side of his head and played it on like a 7 and just blasting him. And he was kind of gushing about it. He's like, this is incredible. I'm like, wow, I'm glad you like it.
We went on tour immediately with that record. And I think it was still kind of like we'd go on tour and play those songs, and I think there's still a little bit of like, what the fuck is that? It didn't really click yet. People didn't know how to digest it. But that's something we were always used to, though, because we didn't necessarily come out looking like your typical band, your hardcore band or straight edge band at the time. So there's a lot of what the fuck aimed at us, no matter what we were doing. I mean, the clothes, or the way we looked, and so what we sounded like too was different. It was a lot of like a lot of people didn't know how to make heads or tails of what we were doing.
So when does the record click?
I want to say probably later in '94, but mostly, I mean, we toured the summer, but when we played locally or in Orange County, those kids were figuring it out. They were getting it. It had been digested and absorbed at that point. And it showed too, because even when we went back on tour the next year to the East Coast a little bit, like it caught on. It'd taken a life of its own. But like I said, out of the gate, there's still a whole lot of like not really understanding it. But yeah, the local kids, they got it. They got it.
What do you think is the legacy of the record?
That's a tough one to answer. I think sometimes, in some recordings, you can just hear something, that is, lost in the digital space and stuff like that. And I think with that particular record and recording, I think there is a real sense of honesty and sincerity that, coupled with the intensity and kind of power of the music, I think that hopefully will be looked upon in a positive and good light. I can honestly say with that recording, it was us, 100% us. I mean, it was, that's a volatile time in people's lives, and we really, again, I met the four right people to make and create and be a part of, again, such honest, tragic, and sincere, but intense, powerful music that we, created. And I think, if anything, even hopefully years from now, you can still hear it and read the lyrics and still know that, okay, these people were letting it out. These particular individuals were expressing themselves with an honest intensity. And, again, not saying that can't still exist, but I think when you hear that recording, I think with the legacy, I think at least you'll be able to hear those qualities in it, hopefully for as long as it exists.
I think for some people, it's, a bane to hardcore. They're just kind of like, this isn't hardcore. This is metal, or this isn't hardcore. This is, dumb mosh music. I don't know. This is metal. I mean, we got, banned from MRR, because the record was quote unquote too metal, so, and someone reviewed it and then got fired from MRR for putting the review of the record in there because they were told not to, because it's not a hardcore record according to Maximum Rock and Roll. So, there were definitely people that didn't like it, and that's okay. Like, you don't have to like everything. I don't like everything, that'd be a miserable way to live, to say you like everything, but I think what mattered, I think, to us was the emotional connection that people had to that record. And I think, to me, that's the legacy of that record. The music is good. It's, it's not the most incredible hardcore ever, but it's good. And I think that what makes this record special is the emotional connection that people have with this record. To this day, I still talk to people about it, and people make references to it and in weird places, but it does come up. And I think that it's in that, to me, was the mission. The mission was, can we release something that is this emotional and this dark and have it be meaningful to people that might not be expecting something like this, or might not ever care about this band, but somehow connect with this record. And for me, that felt like the mission of this record. And for all intents and purposes, I feel that we accomplished that mission. I think that we created something that people felt it was okay to share feelings and cry and ask for help and be depressed and be hurt and be angry and be frustrated, but still ask for help. And to me, that feels like the legacy of the record. I mean, musically, sure, there's probably bands influenced by it, but to me, I think the emotional content, to me, is the legacy of the record more than anything.
I don't know. That's a weird one. Because I've always stated Unbroken was bigger in its death than it was in its actual existence. And I remember, somewhere around like the early 2000s, maybe 2003, 2004, and people just talking about it like it was still a big deal. And to be honest with you, at that time, I had probably did some good distancing from hardcore. I just, around after 97, 98, 99, things just started and it started turning into something that I didn't really relate to anymore. It wasn't my scene. And I kind of just separated myself. So there's probably a lot of things I missed in terms of its evolution. But then it was kind of like people would say things to me and I was like, what? No, that's no, like, I don't see that. And then, turned out a lot of it was true though. And it just kept growing and growing. And every year, when new kids would get into hardcore, that seemed to be a record that someone told them, hey, if you like this, you need to listen to this. If you're going to be part of this, you got to listen to this. So it just kept growing.
I feel like a lot of people cite it as their inspiration to their music. I don't necessarily hear that. I hear some of that out there. I'm like, oh, that does sound like Unbroken. A little bit, but maybe it's just because obviously my point of view is different. But again, I'm constantly just blown away by that the album still has legs and people are still talking about it 30 years later. It's a little unbelievable to me. Again, very humbling and scary a little bit when we play shows, these reunion shows. I do have a memory of, when we did this show in London, I think it was 2010. Not totally sure. But there was a guy who said, yeah, I came from, like Syria. He's like, I came all the way over here to, like, you guys are my favorite band. I love you guys. And, I sold so much stuff to make it out here. And it just terrified me that we couldn't live up to his expectation. I think there's sort of like a myth around the band and an expectation that I feel very challenged in meeting, and not that I should try, but I don't want to let anybody down. And people really care a lot about it. I care about my friends and I care about these guys, but I don't care enough about this as much about this music as other people do. I love playing it and everything. I don't know if you can imagine, but it's just challenging to perform, knowing that mistakes are going to happen, knowing that you're probably not going to play the song exactly right, exactly right. But for some people, they've built it up a long time. Either maybe they've never seen us play, or maybe they've seen us play in 1994 and had a great experience. And sort of trying to meet that expectation is that's what gives me stage fright.
Do you think the legacy has evolved or changed over time at all?
I with that particular question, I hate to say it, I think we're all kind of blinded by our own perspective. I really don't have a lot of, I have very sparse. I actually love that I'm in contact with the guys on Unbroken, because really, in all honesty, I have with those guys and a few friends, I don't have a lot of people that I really, I guess like I would be able to have that time and perspective, if you know what I mean, as we're getting older and less people that, I don't know. I mean, I think it's weird because there are people that every once in a while they get a hold of me that are new Unbroken fans, which is great. I love it. But at the same time, it's hard to gauge that. I think we're kind of blinded by our own perspective. I think for me, again, I'm super proud of Unbroken. I love those guys. But as far as the legacy goes, I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, I remember, being in Alternative Press as a band that shaped punk and stuff. And they were talking about our hair. And so I was like, all right, well, but, I think if anything, I think that's a tough question to say. I don't know, trying to forecast how the times will, how future generations will view things is, I don't know. It's a good question. I'm not really sure. I hope so. I hope, I'm not above saying that, yeah, I'd like to be remembered for that band. But at the end of the day, I'm not really sure. I hope people view it in a positive light.
When it dropped, it, maybe it came across as one thing. But the more time that has passed, maybe it's a nostalgia for that time in everyone's life. Kind of like when I was 16 listening to the Smiths and just feeling like the world is against me or something, or how I'm the most depressed kid in the world. And I think every 16-year-old feels that way. So maybe it's a connection. Yeah. Maybe it's just the connection to that time in their childhood or early adulthood. Feeling that transition happening, feeling more connection to the pains of growing up and growing old.
I think it's evolved to a degree. I think obviously with Eric's passing, I think unfortunately that just kind of adds to the mythos, but I feel that even without that, the legacy of what this record is and what it means to people, it almost feels like, it's kind of like a gateway into emotional hardcore to an extent, into metallic hardcore. I don't know, when you have bands in 2022 and 23 like covering your band and putting it on records, it's kind of like, wow, some of these kids weren't even born when this record came out, and here they are covering it, and recording it. And it's like, that speaks volumes to me that we did something that matters, and something that's resonated and passed down to people. And I am forever grateful to be associated with something that has had that much of a ripple effect.
"185 Miles South. This is Ati Moran, and it's an honor to be invited to talk about the release of Unbroken's 1994 album, Life, Love, Regret. There are so many great memories that I have with Unbroken, watching them from the beginning and grow into the band loved by the masses. It was just amazing to see by the time this album came out. After, in 93, when they finished the Ritual album, immediately after, they started already writing and playing live songs that would be on the Life, Love, Regret album. The songs' lyrics had a more emotional, urgent struggle to them than previously written songs. Raw, punk approach mixed with their metallic style. It just connected with the majority who bought the album and was attending their shows. You just saw a huge swell of fans and just people really into it than previously before. With the recording of Life, Love, Regret, there was 9 songs recorded at Double Time Studios in San Diego by Jeff Forrest. It was an intense environment than previously recording sessions that I attended with them. There was tons of arguments, mainly on the song structures or some vocal patterns, but I think each member was just, passionate about what they were doing and giving it their all. All of them were focused, and it just sounded so massive in the studio when we would hear them back after what was done for each song. But one moment I do recall was at the end of the song Curtain. Eric is screaming and yelling an emotional line, "Regret will always get you in the end," which to this day, I can't even listen to it, but which wasn't written, but organically it just came out. But you can hear the pain Eric was experiencing through the studio speakers, and I was also watching through the glass from the sound booth area. But what was crazy is after that was finished, the producer Jeff asked Eric to do it again, as something wasn't captured right on the levels of the microphone or in the sound booth. But I just remember thinking, how the fuck can you capture something like that again? That was so natural and intense. And I don't know if there was some anger there, but somehow Eric did it again. The 1994 tour to support the Life, Love, Regret album was with Undertow, who are family to the band and myself. I just remember I turned 18 and went on this 3.5-week tour a week after I graduated high school. Rob Moran and myself were close with Jordan at Revelation Records, who let us borrow the Revelation van. The only condition was the band Iceburn just got done using it, and we had to drive one of the members back to Utah. But it was fine because we were on that route anyway. But that was Cash, who was the bass player of Iceburn. And I just remember we had so much fun, talking to him, and it was just a good time on the whole drive over there. I think the main bummer of that tour was the album didn't come out in time, and all we had was shirts and cassettes in the beginning. I just remember kids were just so bummed, "Hey, where's your vinyl?" or something. "You don't have any vinyl yet?" But a week and a half or so into the tour, we picked up the vinyl, and I believe some CDs in another state. But I just remember kids were just bummed out. Another note, I just remember every night on the tour, people were talking to whether myself or someone in Unbroken, almost about stuff that was going on in San Diego or in the past or current, whether it was about amenity, heroin, and struggle. It was just cool that people were interested in what was going on in the San Diego scene, and just wanted to know more about those bands, and it was really cool to chat it up with everyone. On the Life of Regret album, there was some backup vocals done. I remember on the song Razor, In the Name of Progression, were done with some friends who came by the studio to help out. I recall in the bridge part of In the Name of Progression, they wanted someone to yell at the end of a speaking part that Dave was doing. And it was the word down. I recall Rob trying to yell and maybe another member, but it wasn't what they were going for. Someone asked if I wanted to try it, and I did in one try and everyone liked it. I was terrified how it would sound, as I've never recorded anything before, but also basically what was going through my mind is I didn't want to be a sore spot on an amazing album. With the artwork and design for Life, Love, Regret, I do recall like our friend was taking photos of the TV to capture moments from the Swing Kids movie. You know, each photo that was chosen was related to the album title. And it just made so much sense. And it was just a simple but great concept and direction that the members chose to go with. Also, I remember, unfortunately, I do remember the first press of the record, the photos were in black and white, so you couldn't really see what was really going on. So it didn't really fully capture what was originally there. It was repressed later, and there was like blue photos, and you can kind of see it, but it wasn't as clear. And I think now with the indecision press of this record, it's fully visible, and you fully get what the whole direction is for this record. You know, it's such an emotional statement of just life, love, regret. It just resonates with everyone and those who come across it. With the inserts, I remember they wanted to have I think for the first press, there was just a mini booklet that was only around, again for the first press, but each band member had their own page. And I remember we were all just laughing, as one of the funniest things was Eric putting a bus ticket that he had from him leaving and quitting a tour from the previous year. And I don't know why, but we were all just laughing about it. It was one of the funniest things. Like, here was a rough moment he was going through of not handling a tour, but somehow he wanted to laugh at it and capture like that moment of what he was going through. Regarding the album design, I just wanted to add that the original jacket had the spine at the bottom of the record. The top of the jacket was the opening, but it was definitely an homage to the Britpop records they loved and listened to. On a final note, regarding the Life, Love, Regret album, it's extremely difficult for me to even listen to this album. As much as I love it to no end and what went into it, I guess for me, the whole album is like listening to the song Curtain 9 times in a row. It makes me overly emotional, and I feel the pain of Eric no longer being here. It brings me to think about his family and what they went through, as well as other loved ones during that tough period when he took his own life. It's strange to think that I can revisit any other catalog, but I don't put this record on at all. It's been decades. The only time I hear these songs is when I see them live. Even then, I experience so much overwhelming emotion, but I know others are there singing along with me, and I'm not alone.
My name is Aaron Bedard. I sing in the band Bane from Boston, Massachusetts. Yeah, Life, Love, Regret was huge for me. Record came along at a very critical time in my life. 1995, I'd been away from the hardcore scene for about 4 years. Not really paying attention to what was what anymore. But in 95, I get plugged back in. I'm super eager to figure out who was going to replace Burn and Super Touch and Chain of Strength for me. Unbroken were the ones who really stood out. It was for a bunch of reasons. I love that they were so clearly influenced by Slayer. There was a dirtiness to their tone that referenced other metal I'd loved as a kid. Bathory and Celtic Frost. And then every photo I saw of them was fascinating because they just had their own fucking thing going on. They didn't look like any hardcore kids I'd ever known. Rocking suede and Chris and Death t-shirts, dress shoes. At that time in my life, I'd never been anywhere. San Diego felt as far away and foreign in my mind as Tokyo. There was this feeling that something really new and different was going on in San Diego. And that captured my imagination in a way that sort of felt different than other Victory or New Age bands. Lyrically, there was just a lot going on that felt braver and more honest to me. There was some real soul searching going on in those songs, a lot of angst. There was a preoccupation with death that was very relatable to me in those years. It had been a long time since I felt connected with a hardcore band in that way. Like they were speaking directly to me, the same way Youth of Today or Minor Threat used to be speaking to me. So 3 years later, when their guitarist Eric took his own life, it felt particularly shocking, heartbreaking. I didn't know those guys personally, but that's the thing about the best bands and the best records, is they blur that line, right? I remember feeling so sad. That record, the 2 7-inches that followed, became even more powerful, more profound for me. It's rare when you can find art that confirms these ideas you might be struggling with at that exact moment in your life. Ideas about everything not being okay, about life being difficult and fucking really confusing, and that no one's talking about it, and the things that we need to grab hold of to help get us through. That these records we hold dear are truly as important as we've convinced ourselves they are. And, you know, Life, Love, Regret still continues to be that sort of record that's more than a record to me and to so many of my friends still to this very day.
Hello, everyone. This is Daniel Sant, the best dressed man on the pod, nay, the planet Earth. I am here to talk about my favorite hardcore LP of all time, Life, Love, Regret by Unbroken. Now, how do you if someone asked you, what do you love about your, significant other, or even just your mother or something, you'd be like, oh, there's this, this, and this. So that's, you can say things about this record, like it has some of the best hardcore songs ever written. It has such a thing. But, these are all surface level things that you would describe. When you really want to think about why this LP is the ultimate game changer and has been held near and dear to hearts for, since 1994, since it came out, it mattered then just as much as it matters now. And to some people, it has mattered even more in the subsequent years. There are things that are tied to this record that make it even heavier emotionally. With, for example, Eric's passing has magnified the raw emotion that is buried in every strand and fiber of this LP. There are things that you can pull from the lyrics that have been something that has mattered in your life as you have moved through life. This record has always been there to be a guide to figure out your own emotions, because there's something in every one of these songs where you can go down into them and feel the pain and almost have an empathetic friend there going back to you to show you that other people who have come from the same subculture as you have really harnessed how they've expressed pain in this LP. So that may have been a bit of a ramble, because I am doing this just off the top of the head and with an open heart. But the thing about this LP is the sound. This record was recorded by Jeff Forrest at Double Time Studios in San Diego, and I think it is the finest thing he ever did. The thing about recording with Jeff Forrest, because Zach and myself can attest to this, if he's deeply engaged, he's going to really put himself into this, and you can tell he was deeply engaged in Life, Love, Regret. In my records, off and on. In Zach's, off and on also. Like, he just, day job in it. But with this, he gave everything, and it comes through. But he only gave everything, I bet, is because of the musicianship that is being shown here. Like, Steve Miller is no fucking joke. Eric Allen, no fucking joke. Todd, Rob, no joke. Dave, voice is amazing. The music it's so heavy, but it has such a groove, and it is so indebted to Integrity and Slayer, but it doesn't sound like either. It is, those are deep influences, but what comes out is just Unbroken, and it's never been copied, it's never been bettered. It has only been this is the standalone record. There's nothing like this. Even when Unbroken record more songs after this, they're brilliant, but they're different from this. This has such a darkness, like a black and red cloud over it, just holding it in place. And for this to have been made by teenagers and maybe 20-year-olds, it blows me away. I can't fathom that still to this day, that this level of mature expression of pain was being made by kids. And, that's not even mentioning my favorite part of something that isn't musical with this or isn't lyrical, is the layout and the specifically the booklet where each band member got to do their own page to express themselves. I think that is a really mature, amazing choice at the age group that these guys were. And then on top of it, I love the little Smiths nod of, the bass guitar, voice, the drums, all of that. So it shows that they were taking things from like the Smiths and Morrissey in particular, and learning to express themselves through hardcore in that way. Not doing, similes and deep coded messages. They're very straightforward, emotionally raw songs that they matter to everyone who was really plugged into this LP. I cannot begin to... I can't wrap this up neatly. I can't talk about this LP with a scholar's voice or anything like that. I just have to go to things like Eric's page in the booklet and just see the scary, sad path of what was going to be. Todd's page of just visceral, bite back towards the scene that was becoming very judgmental in the 90s. Rob's page of loving showing off what makes him him. Dave's amazing artwork, and then Steve's brutally honest page of just talking about, I don't want to be like my dad who's working himself into an early grave and he might even lose his job, and all I care about is my girlfriend and my band. And I just think all of this presents an honesty in a very, very honest genre of hardcore. This presents an honesty that there's a reason that this has resonated with everyone who's fucked with this record, because this is heart on the, not even on the sleeve. This is open chest, exposed, beating heart hardcore. And the world is so much better of a place for Unbroken giving us Life, Love, Regret. I will love this to the day I die. I'll be listening to this when I'm on my deathbed. I'll be listening to End of a Lifetime thinking, this is the end of my life.
My name is Justin. I play in Field of Flames. I sing in that band. In 2022, my band Field of Flames did a recorded cover of what I believe is one of the all-time greatest hardcore bands, Unbroken. We covered their song called Blanket, which I think there's two versions of it. One's off Getting Tougher to Say the Right Things and off of Life, Love, Regret. I kind of wanted to stick more with the Life, Love, Regret version because that's my one of my favorite hardcore albums. I first heard Life, Love, Regret, I think in 2013 or 2014. I was like in high school at that time. I was probably like a sophomore in high school. And I don't remember how I ended up stumbling upon it. I was kind of just in the process of just discovering hardcore bands like continuously all the time and doing more digging for older bands. And I think at the time it was probably like on Facebook or something where I saw that they were doing like some kind of reunion. And I was like, oh, how old is this band? Who exactly is this band? And I immediately fell in love with it the more I kept listening to it. I was like, fuck, I need to go see this reunion show because this will probably be the only time I'll be ever able to see Unbroken. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to make it out to that show to be able to see them. But that band holds like a special place in my heart just because I think of the time of what I was experiencing like in high school and growing up. And just the whole aesthetic of the band is so like, I guess, mysterious for lack of a better term. Cause there wasn't much like info I could find about like the band at the time, even though there was like, obviously so much access to the internet and stuff still. I would have to listen to the songs on like YouTube. That's like where I would like listen to, and I would rip the files from YouTube to try to put it onto my iPod to be able to play it. All the songs like in order, the progression, the sequencing of the tracks, absolutely perfect. Lyrical content, absolutely perfect. Like production of the recordings and like the quality of them, it's so fitting, very raw and full of just like emotion, I guess, for lack of a better term. Emotion is probably the best word I can use to describe it. The song Blanket obviously is my favorite song off the album. I'd say second. A lot of people would agree with me. I think Razor is also probably my favorite song off that album. But the lyrical content for Blanket, like specifically, speaks to me on a more personal level with like the idea of like just questioning like religion as like a whole. And I think that's something a lot of people in hardcore have like tend to have done in the past. But the way Unbroken captures it in this track is so raw, very angry, and it just resonates with me, I think, the most, more than anything else I've ever heard before. I have no idea about the people in these bands. Like, to be totally honest with you, I never got the opportunity to be able to speak with them or to like be introduced to them. I'm never really too often in Southern California to be able to. I'm not even sure if any of them still live there, but I was like super proud to be able to like catch the attention of Rob specifically on the re-recording of or the how do I say it? Cover, of Blanket on the Field of Flames recordings. That's the first band I ever like fronted or ever sang in. And I actually ended up tracking all the instruments to that version on the Field of Flames recording because I've listened to that song so many times. I know every single like fill and riff and like a range of vocal style that the singer does. And I wanted to make sure I didn't disgrace the song in any way. I actually originally reached out to him via like direct message, and I ended up being like, I shouldn't send this. And I sent it, and he never really acknowledged it, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure he's a busy gentleman with a lot of people who reach out to him, because I wanted to ask for proper like permission to be able to do it without being disrespectful to like the song and the the nature of the whole band. So I'm very thankful that he's appreciative of it, and I'm appreciative of him and his music, and everything he's put into the hardcore realm with this album, specifically Life, Love, Regret. And yeah, it'll always be one of my favorite hardcore albums of all time for sure. Hope to be able to see it live one day or hear it one day. I mean, I know other bands have tried to like record it in the past or cover it in the past, but there's just no match to the way they did it. And it was just a specific like time and place and era that can't like be recreated. And I totally respect that, and I acknowledge that because of it's just a really important album to me.
I'm Mike from Gehenna. Zach asked if I wanted to say a couple things about Unbroken's Life, Love, Regret album. I was pretty close to the members of the band at the time that it was written, and I roadied for them on their 93 Ritual tour. The thing about the album is that you could talk to hundreds of people for hours about it, and they'd all have different reasons about why they think Life, Love, Regret is great. I think the unfortunate thing is that a lot of those reasons are wrong. Most everybody is going to say things about the tuning or the recording or whatever, but all that stuff is kind of just surface bullshit, and it doesn't even affect why the record is so mind-blowing. I think what you have to do to understand why the record is great is go back to before the Ritual tour happened. So back in 93, the album Ritual, their first album, wasn't even released, and they were already starting to work on the songs that would be on Life, Love, Regret. And these songs were already kind of forming and being reworked over and over again. By the time they really kind of started to flesh things out, local San Diego folks were hearing this at rehearsals when they were hanging with them, or, at shows or whatever. And they already knew something different was going on, right? When I was helping Eric with some lyrics for Final Expression, I said to him, people aren't going to be able to grasp this at all. And he was like, yeah, but it's not even done yet. So fast forward to 1993, right? The time the Ritual tour is about to happen in the summer of 93, they already have D4, Final Expression, Setup, and Blanket as part of their set. In other words, they're already playing 50% of their live set as new unreleased material. And they go out on the road and are playing in front of kids, but not playing these songs to please kids. They're playing the songs to force each other to get better at playing the songs. They're playing the songs to force each other to really distill the good and the best parts of each song, to sort of weigh through everything and kind of cut through the minor stuff that isn't really great and find those fantastic moments, so that way the record can be a fully formed thought. And I think genuinely they're pushing themselves to dial things in to be tighter and faster than they could be, or to be more pronounced than they were before. And that's exactly what they did. By the time they went into record in early 94 or late 93, they'd already played these songs over and over and over again and got them incredibly tight. And that's something you rarely hear people talking about when they record a record. They don't have the dedication to producing a great record. Most people don't have the focus on being patient and waiting and working things out and editing and editing and editing. And that's why Life, Love, Regret is great, because they edited it. They didn't just release every dumb thought that came to their head. They found a way to distill the songs and committed to help each other push one another to make things better, to make a record that they could truly be proud of. And I think that's something that people should take the time to do, because if they did, maybe they might put out a record that's a fraction as good as Life, Love, Regret. Anyways, R.I.P. Eric Helmick. Shout out to my friends at Unbroken for taking the time to craft a great record. Shout out to Zach and Dan in 185 Miles South, and big ups to the Wizard out on the streets of New Orleans. All right, peace.
Hey, this is Justin Pearson from 31G, Swing Kids, The Locust, Dead Cross, Def Club, a bunch of other bands. Rob Moran had asked me to give my comments on Life, Love, Regret by Unbroken, and said to say something for 3 to 5 minutes. And I unfortunately could go on for hours talking about the band and the album. But just off the top of my head, I think that it was, nostalgia aside, I think it was one of the most important hardcore records of its time. I think the band was unique and above every, standard of what people would expect from a 90s hardcore straight edge band. They sounded cooler, they looked cooler, and, they were just more badass than everybody else. The record speaks for itself, I think, and it still holds up musically. And I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to it. The cover, having stills from the film Swing Kids, was an interesting move on Eric Allen's part, since him and I were in Swing Kids together. I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the movie itself, but more the concept of it. But it was cool to kind of have that tie into something that I was doing with Eric. And I don't know, the way that the album cover opened from the top, I thought was very unique. The texture of the sleeve not being glossy like a lot of hardcore bands were doing at the time. The lack of color in the artwork was, I think, very important and relevant. You know, and I think it just shows that their influences were drawn from all kinds of different aspects. Even the insert with the writing from each member had a very sort of ebullition, downcast feel to it. And I don't know. I think it's just one of those records that I will always love and listen to, and will always make sense to me, because the players are sincere, and my family, they're my brothers. They're, I don't know. They helped people. They changed lives. They changed the trajectory of genres. And their influence reached further than they probably expected at the time when the record came out. I miss Eric every day, and every time I play a show, somehow he's with me. Yeah, I'm grateful for that guy, and I'm grateful for Unbroken. And I think Life, Love, Regret is probably one of the best hardcore records. I would even say metal records. But we know how the metal community is. Anyhow, I think it's one of the best, you know, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, albums of that era. And yeah, there's just a lot to it. There's so much to it that I don't even know where to start. You know, I don't even know where to continue with unpacking. It's just an amazing record, and yeah, it's an amazing band. I'm glad it existed, and I'm glad I had a relationship with them, and I appreciate my personal relationship with the album. Thanks.
This is John Pettibone. Life, Love, Regret is a record that has held many lifelines through the decades and is still celebrated with each emerging new generation. Aggressively potent, hopelessly poetic, and embraces an innocence of young, dark expression that creates a twisted version and outcome of inspiration. It carries subtle tributes to greats like Integrity and No Escape, with the punk essence of The Damned and a swagger of Nation of Ulysses, yet holding firm to an identity in a community that was at most times sincerely sterile and disappointing. These songs offer and ask for self-compassion. This record isn't about saving the world, it's about saving yourself, by any means, painful or triumphant. Life, Love, Regret is my firestorm.
What's up, everyone? It is your friend, Zach Nelson from the 185 Mile South podcast. And in my opinion, what makes this record so special is that it's a punk record at its core. I think that spirit is flowing through it. And it sounds like dudes that have listened and love the Sex Pistols and the Ramones and the Circle Jerks and Negative Approach. And they're not shying away from the fact that they're into punk and hardcore, right? I think a lot of metal influenced hardcore records of this era and beyond are basically records playing in the minor leagues, hoping that they are going to be big metal records, you know, and that's fine. But it doesn't have that spirit that flows through it like this does. And that's what makes it special. I don't think these are dudes in a room trying to be strategic about their band. I think they're just letting songs flow and following where the music leads them. And they allow themselves to take that journey, right? These songs go in weird directions sometimes, in really chaotic directions sometimes that are wild, and it takes a certain amount of channeling, like these ideas that come to you, to let that play out, right? To not be like, no, we shouldn't go there. We got to be like this. We got to be like that. It doesn't sound like they're trying to be like anything except for themselves. That's a very hard thing to do that you do not hear that often. And I think that's why this record stands the test of time and why it's so revered and why, people come across it still and it connects with them because there's just an honesty that's there. They are who they are, right? Um, yeah. But the most important thing is that it's a fucking punk record, and that's what makes it great.